Welcome to the GoOutLiving Attitude, a cancer survivor's journey through health and wellness, helping others search for the tools to bring us a healthier and happier lifestyle. Hi, everybody. Jonathan Brandt, GoOutLiving. Today's special guest is Doug Red Hail Pineda, who is the founder of the Church of Psychedelics, provocative thinker, exploring the intersection of consciousness, spirituality, psychedelics, and the future of human evolution. Doug, it is a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.
So we were talking a little bit before we came on, and like I said, there's some things with psychedelics that scares me that I really don't understand. But I wanted to start with really the holistic side of everything, because that's something you have gotten into as well, and the spiritual side. And then we'll move into more what we might think is controversial. But so let's head to, that spiritual side. And can I find out where you came from and what you've built now?
Sure. Thanks, Jonathan. Um, so, yeah, when we start to unfold the subject of natural plant medicines and natural psychedelics, it definitely takes on. You have to definitely address the two things in the room that have been around for a long time: the propaganda and the stigma of each. And I've watched that early on. You had mentioned that we just had a brief conversation before starting just now, and I think it's a good place to start because I was involved in the early days in Colorado of getting industrial hemp legalized in the state. And industrial hemp is just regular old food, fuel, fiber industrial hemp. It's not the cannabis side. It was happening just on the coattails of cannabis becoming legalized in the state of Colorado. And when I saw that progression happening through the legislation, I was wondering, why is industrial hemp having a harder time to get legalized in the state of Colorado than cannabis? Cannabis definitely comes with a lot of propaganda and stigma. And then what I realized is that cannabis had a lot of enemies, had a lot of opponents, it threatened a lot of standing industries. It definitely threatens oil and gas, industrial hemp. As soon as people probably don't realize a lot that it is very easy to make a type of ethanol out of industrial hemp. And what I mean by that is there's $1 trillion industry that is out there destroying the environment and harming the health of human families all across the world in a multi-trillion-dollar empire. If you think about the longevity of it and the different industries that it supports and keeps on life support with it. And when you have a crop that can create an ethanol that can be easily turned into gasoline for less than 75 cents a gallon, whether it's regular or super unleaded, and an unlimited source of it, doesn't take a lot of water, doesn't take a lot of herbicides or pesticides. It can grow in any soil condition. It grows on many different farm type plots all around the world. It renews itself every 90 days. It doesn't take very much to harvest. It doesn't take a lot of anything. It's just one of those super crops. But it challenges industries like oil and gas. It challenges an industry like cotton. Cotton is extremely the same as oil and gas, very destructive, very harmful. Its chemicals are terrible. Herbicides, pesticides, it requires a lot of water. The end result is fibers that aren't very long, they're not very strong. Whereas industrial hemp, again, the same positive elements of growing industrial hemp. Not a lot of water, not a lot of pesticides or herbicides. It grows everywhere. It renews every 90 days, on and on. So that's when I started to see that was happening at the legislation level by going through that. I was seeing that, wow, if industrial hemp is having this type of issue, I saw in the periphery of also what was happening on Capitol Hill at that time was natural plant medicines were coming up. And they were very much having a problem having people connect with 70 plus years of propaganda again and stigma, and this is your brain on drugs and you're going to jump out of a 3-story window and on and on. But then you look at the indigenous side of the world. Why are they working with plant medicines for 10,000 plus years, as we can tell, going back into discovering the tools and the instruments and the spiritual and ceremonial things that we were able to find we can tell that psychedelics were being used at that point, and is still being used today with indigenous cultures that have not yet lost connection with their roots and the bloodlines of where they come from spiritually and otherwise. So I looked at that because I work with a lot of Native American work and indigenous other work, and I've traveled the world doing ceremonies, sitting on jungle floors, and in places all over in Europe, I mean everywhere. And I started seeing like this is not this is not the danger that the politicians and the bureaucrats and corporate heads of corporations are telling us. It's not. They're definitely keeping it away from people. So it was around 2017 to 18, and I was at a ceremony, and the chief of all chiefs, Leonard Crodog from the Buffalo Nation people, he had approached me and said, I've known Chief for a long time, well, relatively, and we had been to ceremonies together, and just we'd been around, and he pulled me to the side, and he said that he was aware and had been watching me what I was doing in the world of industrial hemp. And he said that there's a similar battle going on in the minds and the hearts of people around natural medicines, specifically psychedelics, even his own people. And he said that he wanted me to work with natural plant medicine specifically and help do what I did with industrial hemp to bring it to the forefront of human attention and to the modern world. And so that was when the chief of all chiefs, you know, um, gives you a journey or an endeavor like that, then I took it up. And I was already in that industry because being in industrial hemp, it's those two subjects, natural medicines, natural plants that were illegal, tried to become legal and back, into the arms and the hands of humanity. I was watching it, like I said, both happened at the same time. So there was a time so I went into ceremony with that, and Humblechia, which is Vision Quest, and then after that I had the vision of what this looked like. And then as soon as you do that, it's funny how the world kind of starts to assemble around you, and all of a sudden there was all of these um doorways that were opening and subjects that were involving me now. And that's when the Colorado and ended up getting plant medicine legalized. It was a House Bill 122, and it passed by a very small percentage, but it passed nonetheless, which made it law in the state. And so Colorado assembled itself to create a Department of Regulatory Agency to manage it, basically to get their taxes from it. And um and that's where it started. And so but I went the different route. I could have went through the licensing route, which I was setting myself up to do, but I went through the spiritual route because that is the element that I think has the strongest sword and shield of protection and advancement around the use of holistic natural plants and the molecular structure that they offer us to work with our bodies to and our minds to bring a different level of awareness, a connection to consciousness, to integration with the natural systems within our bodies, um, and to supply some of those things as tools to work with that are different than a regular of just taking a pill and slamming it down with some water or something. It's different because it's about the relationships of things. And so that's when this started to coalesce together. And because of the ways of the Western world and the IRS and the organizational structures of corporations, etc., we had to go in the direction of a church, a religious or a formally recognized religious organization, in order to have the protection that people needed as members of a church in order to receive psychedelics as sacrament. And if they're working with psychedelics, natural psychedelics, as a sacrament to help them with their path of spiritual development, then there are a lot of protections that people have inside of that membership in order to receive psychedelics in order to work with. And so I'll wrap this up in just a moment here. And so what we did is we put a structure of a spiritual belief system called the Golden Path in order for people to um, work with natural plant medicines. And so that's where we're at right now. Is the first uh, unfolding is basically to have natural plant medicines available as sacrament. In our case, specifically psilocybin and for psychedelic mushrooms. That is a really great entryway for people building a relationship with this type of medicine. And so I'll pause there as kind of as the whole idea around, if we're going to enter this conversation, and we're going to do it around this idea about building a relationship with plant medicine, then that relationship basically has a number of the first a doorway that we walk through intellectually. And that first doorway is that it's been said many ways. And the way that I say it, this particular phrase, is the doorway to which I approach most any conversation having psychedelics, which is, we are a spiritual being having a human experience. So we are a spiritual being having a human experience. And we're in this phase of humanity right now today. Look around, right? Of all the things that we see, we're in this next phase of humanity. It's about a life where coming back into balance. If Leonard Crodog was here, I would say that that's something that I think that he may say, because that's coming back into balance, living in alignment with the natural laws of nature and the cosmos will eventually just be an everyday commonplace practice in society. But we're not there yet, but we certainly are on the threshold of it. And I think people can feel that. And in order to get to that place, this idea of we are spiritual beings having a human experience, to get to that place means that there's going to be some sort of integration or study of source consciousness. And that's your spiritual being side. Having a relation, building back that relationship with source consciousness. And the having a human experience side is the practice of expanding our awareness is going to be needed. So the practice of expanding our awareness and natural psychedelics, these are allies for humans that open the doors of our perception as to work with this spiritual technology in order to integrate these two things about what it means to be a spiritual being having a human experience. And I'll pause there.
That's perfect. I mean, that's what makes sense to me is we had gotten off track for a long time in so many different ways. And when you talk about spirituality, I've talked about this a lot in different podcast episodes, that I didn't have anything to do with spiritual before my cancer. I mean, nothing. You kind of just live your life and you just go with it, and it takes you wherever. And unless you want to consciously go after that spiritual side, we just don't have it in our culture as much as we used to, like you said. So going down that road to the spiritual side of it, is there a way that people are they looking more at the spiritual side because of health issues, because of stress, because of everyday life is becoming overwhelming? Do you find people are kind of headed towards that spiritual side because of just where we're at in the world?
Jonathan, well put. That's exactly why we are. Just before any breakthrough of anything, there has to be some sort of, cumulative, you know, um, energy that's building up, some sort of like threshold, some sort of, what do they call that? There's a buildup of a mass um, perception, a buildup of, you know, energy that's looking to break through. And so one of the reasons that the Church of Psychedelics exists is to help people better understand themselves, to strengthen their relationships, and to become more compassionate, more purposeful, and more fully human. Um, it's funny. I don't know why, Chief Leonard Crodog is on my mind so much today, but he would say to people, we're not here to be important. We're here to be useful. And I think that when people are having this existential type of, you know, uh, I don't want to say crisis, because I think that's when you start to bring dramatics into it, it's not very helpful, because we're past the stage of drama. We're now into the stage of being useful and doing something about it. And so, you know, I think that that's part of the idea of what we're coming around to is, if we're the spiritual beings having a human experience, how do we do that in a good way? That's the question that's coming into people's minds is, how do we do that in a good way? It's another way of saying, I don't know what to do. But if we are going to do it, how do we do it in a good way? How do we fully step into this human experience? How do we drop into this present moment and the practice of human development? People always talk about, personal development, but that's fine. I think that word should be changed to human development because I don't think we're fully human yet. We've been so disconnected over the last 750 years, 500 years to 750 years of when colonization came in. It really changed everything about our humanity. It started to take things that were, that had extreme value, but the people would tell you it has no value. Like the forest is just a forest. It's got no significant value. There's lots of it. It doesn't have any value until we cut it down, turn it into paper and, whatever else we use pulp and wood for, and then we can sell it. Now it has value. And then it starts to come into the scheming of things. Now that has value and we can make money off of it, money now feeds armies. Now we can build armies off of it. And once we have armies, we can send those armies. We can make up things to send our armies over to different places to do horrific things, but under the guise of, you know, this is for your safety, you know, and we can destabilize governments and take over their land. And then once we have the land, then we have got the people on it. And once we got the people on it, then those taxes go to us versus somebody else. Right? And that level of and then, that colonization all comes with slavery. Well, if we can get free labor to cut down the forests and to cut the rock and to, crush the rock and to, build the tunnels and to, lay down the railroads and to, harvest the crops and we don't have to pay somebody, then that would be even better. That means more money, right? So how do we do that? And then we start to devise schemes about how to remove the human dignity out of people in the most horrific way possible in order to create enslavement. And then now there's yet another industry, right? So we've got to just at least acknowledge the roots of how this developed and got us here. And then now that we know that it took a lot of horrible people with a lot of terrible intentions, and it took them a long time to get us here, oil and gas, like we talked about, there's free energy devices that exist right now. There's thousands of videos on YouTube right now. I've seen free energy devices at conventions and expos right with my own eyes. I saw my first free energy device about 15, 18 years ago with a guy in a van that was not that wasn't being creepy, but he wasn't allowed into the area. There was just one of those outdoor type of events, and there was a guy showing people. It was a huge crowd, and so I went over to that crowd and I looked at it, and this was a guy showing how magnets working at extreme velocities were creating enough energy to jumpstart dead batteries of vans. He didn't have a dead battery, but he was just showing he used batteries that were dead to show them how that within moments that how to charge them. And I was like, what? I'm like, he's like, and if I were to make this 4 times larger, this will power your entire house for an entire 24-hour period of time. And if you had everything on, you had your air conditioning on, you had your refrigerator open, you had your washer and dryer going, you had every house in the light on. And he was showing the math about how this machine would do that. So what I'm getting at is we just have to acknowledge where it comes from, because if we're not acknowledging the root source of humanity, where we're at right now in it, how we got here health wise, how we got here intellectually, how we got here societally, how we got here. If we don't know how we got here, then we don't know the roots of the issues. And if we're not working on the roots of the issues, then we're just hacking at the branches and the leaves of the tree of the issue. We're not getting into the trunk or the root system of where any kind of malady starts from. So that's a lot. But how
No,
do we
I
drop
yeah,
it?
yeah. No, and I
Right?
agree. Something we had talked about earlier too is the pharmaceuticals. They started off with the natural side of things, but like you said, to make money, You can't make money off natural. You have to they take that natural and play with it to make it their own, then they can get that patent and then they can make money. And again, it's just another way that we have gone down the to me the wrong road because we're putting money, we're putting power over honest healing.
It does. When you start going down the path, and previous to this, what I would help develop and build out laboratories. So I worked with many PhD biochemists, PhD, just fill in the title. And that's when I learned years ago that you cannot patent a natural biological molecule. However, if you get in there with science and you start to put the hands of humans in there and start to mess around with the genes and the coding or the molecular structure and you make it something else, you can patent that. And then, so are you really honestly giving your other fellow human beings the absolute best that you can, or did you go back to colonization? Because those are the roots of what we're dealing with right now today. If you watch any television commercial with all of these different pharmaceuticals on there and how they show people playing tennis and hopping around and smiling and laughing while they're telling you the most horrific thing that it's going to do on the side, you know, the most terrible things that you're just going to, hurt your brain and your kidneys and you're going to bleed from the space between your anus. And I'm like, what the hell
Mhm.
makes you bleed from there? Like, what? How is
Yeah,
this even possible that this is even allowed legally? you know
you
but it
know,
goes to show you what they do when you this is outside of just the dramatics of it. Look at it this way, or this way, I at least this is the way I look at it. You have you have a natural molecule that does all of these amazing things, like for instance psychedelic mushrooms. It is a full spectrum serotonin supplement, right? And if you put serotonin in your brain, what serotonin does is it activates a lot of the healing and curative mechanisms of neurological networks. Okay, that's what it does in and of itself. And then along the way, it makes you incredibly happy. Right. It makes you very happy. Now you can go into the big doses. See, this is where society puts things at its most extreme. You can either do microdosing psilocybin, and a lot of people will say, like, well, yeah, but you really don't feel it. And that's what psychedelics are known for, is the feeling, the experience. Or you go to the exact opposite side and it says, you're gonna go so far, you can't be functional, you can't be out and about, you can't be it is you are in a different dimension. And I'm like, okay, if anybody who's ever actually worked with natural psychedelics and worked with it in a way, an intelligent way, and in a way that's respectful of the spiritual element of it, you are going to have the experience of why this is actually legalized right now. And it's spreading quickly, like cannabis. It's spreading quickly in its legality across the United States. So if we are if how do we work with it in that good way? Well, that molecule, the moment that you start to put the hands of humans inside of it and start to mess around with the molecular structure and the genetics of it, you are literally removing the element of it that makes it special, that makes it powerful. You're literally removing the power out of it because you're removing the sentience out of it. You're removing the soul out of it. A human hand reaching in there and messing around with the molecular structure has no business being in there. That's pharmaceuticals at work, working to create a molecule that they can patent, that they can put into the medical system, and that's the only way that you're going to be able to get it, because it's for your safety, because they've distilled it down into a certain molecule where that's the element of the molecule that works the best. We've patented it, and there you go, that's it for you.
well,
But
and
it
then
doesn't bring
it
the
then it
rest of the
comes
holistic, right? It doesn't bring those other elements of the entourage effect from a full bodied experience with the full fruiting body, with all of the other elements that come along with it. That's what you need to do. So essentially what you're doing is, when you put a synthetic pharmaceutical into your body, you're putting a zombie molecule into your body. And look what they do with, just in your mind right now, pick one of the most dramatic scenes of zombies attacking in any movie that you can think of as a zombie movie. And just that's relationally what it's doing to your body when you put a zombie molecule into your body. Now, I'm not saying every molecule is bad. There's synthetic molecules that have been developed that absolutely do what they're supposed to do and work. When you have a zombie molecule and they're telling you straight out, when you've got 18 inches of, 1.5 point type telling you all the horrible things that it could possibly happen to you, or they're telling that to you in the commercial, that's also real, because that's what happens when you put a zombie molecule in your body, the same way as you see zombies attacking in a movie. That's why you have those side effects. That's what it's doing. So when you can, and as it relates specifically to the idea of working with the mind and the heart, that's what natural psychedelics are meant to do. Specifically, things like DMT and even more specifically, psychedelic mushrooms.
Something that I thought about while you were talking about everything is people always go back to, well, it's not tested. We talked about that too. There are tests that are out there from some pharmaceuticals that nobody sees because they know how wrong it is.
Yes.
We are very reluctant to test natural stuff because again, there's no money in it. There's no power in it. So that's really a bad excuse, isn't it? To not really be understanding what it can do for people in general.
Yeah. I think there's testing that branches out into two separate conversations. One is literally laboratory testing. So, like with our psychedelic mushrooms, we do third-party lab testing at the same laboratory that the psychedelics uh, contests for purity and potency and those type of things. We use that exact laboratory, and so we know every single molecule and compound that is in every single one of our batches that is we cultivate and grow. And so that's how the first thing, because like I said, I come from the laboratory side of things as a professional background. So I bring over the pharmaceutical level of practices and efficiencies and effectiveness uh, modalities about working with molecules, whether it's the equipment or the atmosphere and clean rooms or the testing. So I do the same thing. Our stuff, um, when I say our stuff, like all the stuff, like all of our practices, all of our molecules, all of our plant medicine, all of that goes to that same level. So no one can ever come back and look at it and say, like, oh, this is just being done in, basements or back rooms or whatever. No, it's a fully functioning facility with laboratory level and pharmaceutical level practices and cleanliness at the same level with pharmaceutical levels of cleanliness, et cetera, all of that. And so that's one thing that I made sure that we approached this in this way, because when you're dealing with people's health, that is the utmost type of responsibility that you can have. And then you have the second part of this, which is then getting to know this more, like other testing, like research and clinical trials and things like that. There are things happening right now with people that have spinal cord injuries, you know, paralyzed from the sternum or chest down. Um, there have like different type of maladies um, that are having things that are have to do with like being paralyzed in different forms in different ways. And right now they take our I know it's a little bit of it comes from the old days, and because it's called a one of those psychedelic mushrooms, one of the strains is called penis envy, and they call it penis envy because its structure looks like it's very phallic, and then it has the bulb on the end, so it definitely looks like penis envy, like a big penis. Anyway, I know that's a strange, but it's a carryover from those days. Anyway, so we have a strain of penis envy that works with at a microdosing level, which is it's a sub-perceptual amount of psilocybin. And these people with these spinal cord injuries, after ingesting about 25 to 30 minutes, their bodies start to react. Their abdomens are spasming, their have spasticity to them. They're having movement in their legs that they've never had before. And doctors, researchers, scientists are looking at this going, I don't know what's going on, but they never taught us about psilocybin in medical school. They never taught us about the endocannabinoid system in medical school. We've never taught us about that you should not be having any of these electrical signals in your body. You are paralyzed, sir or ma'am. What is happening with you? And they don't know why. And this has been happening for a long time. And I'm well aware, you can go on Instagram and TikTok and a couple other places and find these people that are paraplegics or have T5, type of spinal cord injuries where they're paralyzed and they are having psilocybin is bringing electrical signals back into their body. And this is happening right now. So there's some research that is quickly coming together around these these happenings, uh these results. So that's then you have things like that are coming out of Europe. One single dose of psilocybin is curing a lifetime of that people have had of with cluster migraines. There's things happening now to where there was an 80-plus-year-old woman um in one of the Latin countries. I should have. I'm just reading about this now. I just saw it. I actually put the paper off to the side, but I don't look for the articles. I look for the peer-reviewed research that is referring to it. I follow PubMed and all of those scientific communities where they show where they publish peer-reviewed scientific papers. Those are my articles. I don't just read what Instagram puts up at the top. I go to verify these. There's an 80-year-old woman who had advanced Alzheimer's, had no idea who she was, her children. She had lost almost all language. And she took I think it was a 5+ gram dose. And when she exited several hours later of that experience, mental cognition was back, full language was back, knowing who she and the people around her and her family was. Um, Memory recall of what she used to do in her as she was growing up. This is happening right now. That's not the first one. I've heard of like many, many, many people with Alzheimer's, sundowners. Then you get into the other neurological type of issues like cerebral palsy and multiple sclerosis, and it just goes on and on. This is what this medicine specifically does. So if you can imagine, they knew what this did 70 years ago too, and that's why they made it illegal.
Do you find hope then in that they're starting to understand how we actually do need it in our
Yeah,
lives?
I do find hope because I don't care about the doctors, researchers, and scientists anymore. They used to control a very specific element of our trust in this world, and they still do. They still do. But I also realize now, as I'm getting older, and now that I've gone through personal experiences and people around me going through personal experiences, is how very limited they are in their actual intelligence around molecules and science and chemistry and the human biological system. I've verified now with, I think, 9 doctors of various backgrounds and institutions in the medical industry, PhDs, not people coming up and around, literally PhDs from just coming out of medical school to have been a doctor for 50+ years. None of them, none of them have studied the most powerful immunological system in your body, which is your endocannabinoid system. It's not in there. It's not in the American Medical Association's educational system to teach our doctors the immunological system of the human body, the endocannabinoid system. It's not in there. They don't know what a CB1 or CB2 receptor is. They don't know. They've never been taught. So once you realize the profound insanity of that one particular concept, then you start to be like, okay, I need to be taking my health a little bit more. I need to take agency over my own health.
Well, and that's why we're here. Like I told you ahead of this, I don't know anything about psychedelics. I don't. I've never been taught. I don't. I've never been around it, so I don't know. But what I've learned through everything I've been through is to keep an open mind. And that's why we do what we're doing, is to try and help people understand there is other stuff out there. There are, like I said, I hate to say alternatives because they're natural. They've been there for a long time. thousands of years. So one of the big things I'm doing today is to tell everybody, just keep an open mind when we're talking about stuff like this, because we know things aren't working. We do. Look at the state of the US right now, as far as we can even just look at the physical, the obesity side of everybody, the mental side of everybody. We're in a tough spot right now. So, getting back to mind, body, soul, getting back to natural remedies. Why is that controversial?
I think it's controversial because I think it's a communication challenge. So I think one of the most important communication challenges in psychedelics today, in my view, is the most effective approach is not to argue with the propaganda and the stigma directly. I've learned that. That's pushing a boulder uphill because when people feel they're being persuaded to change their beliefs about psychedelics, they often become more resistant. So instead, I begin with the principles that most people kind of already accept. This principles of like healing, curiosity, nature, natural systems, personal growth, personal development, and responsibility. That's the agency part, the responsibility, the agency of our own health, and then show how psychedelics fit within those, I guess, principles. So the idea is to reframe the conversation. So instead of asking like, should people take psychedelics, Jonathan? Instead ask, why would nature evolve plants and fungi that have the ability to profoundly affect human consciousness and healing? Why would they do that? So instead of saying like psychedelics change your mind, it's kind of like saying like sometimes they allow you to see your mind and your situation more clearly. So it's reframing the conversation, first of all, and how to get us to that next level of conversation. Because in society, we have that mockingbird effect in news, right? They all get together, they all have agendas. No one is ever going to criticize pharmaceuticals because guess who's paying the paychecks? It's those pharmaceutical commercials. And no one's ever going to go against pharmaceuticals, right? So that's one of the reasons why you're not going to have a real conversation. The news, they're not talking about, I mean, look what we're dealing with at this moment in history right now. The entire world is talking about the Epstein files. Everybody everywhere is talking about the Epstein files, except for who? Except for the news agencies and newspapers whose it is to give us the information. So instead, they sanitize the news for us at the corporate news level, and that's what we get to see collectively. But individually, when you start to look around and take agency over your own mind, your own body, your own spirit, and you start to take agency, you look around, the 99.8% of the rest of the world is talking about it, except for the places that are supposed to be talking about it. So that's the idea of everything that is like not totally correct in the world. How do we get it back to balance? By reframing the conversation. And I think it's those two ways. So why would nature evolve plants and fungi and these amazing things to have the ability to heal us in the most amazing and profound ways and affect our human consciousness of evolution of it and our health and well-being? Why? Because they're human allies. These are medicines that we're supposed to be using and working with. So some of the biggest truths that come around are like, most people don't need more information. We've got all the information in the world at our fingertips, and now that AI is here, now that that puts nitrous into the amount of information we're being able to access and distill down into usable, measurable elements of it. Sometimes changing perspective changes everything. And in order to change perspective, we have to reframe the conversation. As it relates to like the mushroom, the healing doesn't come from the mushroom itself. The mushroom doesn't heal you. Your mind and your body do the healing. The mushroom just may help create the conditions in which that healing becomes more accessible because it makes this connection. That's a lot of Native American is a common saying, the longest journey is from the head back to the heart. And it's that idea that this mushroom helps create the condition to help create that ability for the healing comes more accessible from the head back to the heart. It keeps the emphasis on personal responsibility rather than attributing the healing to some sort of outside substance alone.
I love that. It's so true. It is so true. Until I took hold of my own health, yeah, I wasn't getting any better, and I'm still fighting that. So I get that. It makes complete sense to me. So, how do people learn more about this?
So I think that the idea is to take agency over your own understanding of, like, what do you think about psychedelics, natural plant medicine psychedelics? What do you think about it, right? Not what is your peer group or your others, like, you could take that into consideration, but you already know that what others have thought about it for a long period of time has already been around. Now it's the personal responsibility to learn about it yourself. You literally have that responsibility. If you want to go back to how things used to be, right? You want to start having deeper elements of, like, intuition and instinct and connection. You look up at the clouds and you're like, wow, it's going to rain tomorrow. Or what does it mean when the moon goes through this particular phase? Or what we're a natural organism we're a biological natural organism that is just reacting to the environment, just like plants and animals and everything. There's an amazing beauty in that. There's an amazing power in that. And how do we get back to that state to where we're now back in relationship, a right relationship, a balanced relationship with the wild divine? How do we get back there? And it's through these type of medicines that help us open the doorways of perception and expand our awareness and deepen that relational connection to source consciousness, God. How does those elements come together? Because that's not on your nightly news. And unless it's just little tidbits of, you know influencer spiritualists on TikTok, you're not going to get there. You're not going to get there by wading into the shallow end of the pool. You're going to have to get back and do a deep dive into your own humanity. That's how we get there. It's the study of source consciousness. It's the practice of expanding our awareness. And if you want to, this is why it's helpful, because to get there, it's such a magnanimous leap sometimes of our human intelligence about how to get there, because we want to pick everything apart and make sense of it. And sometimes when we work with plant medicine is the thing that comes through and opens those doors and helps us understand where to enter that doorway through. So the word, when I keep on using the word natural plant medicine, and I'm hopefully getting the word more normalized, of the word entheogen. Entheogen is a word that means natural plant medicines, not just plant medicines, but anything that creates a psychedelic effect that's natural. So it could be a toad, it could be a frog, it could be a pufferfish, it could be a root, it could be a leaf, it could be a vine, it could be a mushroom, it could be a fungi source of fungi, it could be any of those. The word entheogen has Greek roots. It literally means um, En means within us. Theos or Theo means God or divine or divinity. And gen means to generate or to become. So entheogen, God within, literally means like generating the divine within, or bringing forth God from within ourselves. That's what entheogen means. Why do you think thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago the Greek had a word that came in? Remember, the Greek was the epicenter because of where they're situated in the world. It wasn't just them figuring this out. They had cross traffic coming from all parts of the world. Was a throughway, was like Greece was the grand central station for so many things happening in the world thousands of years ago. And they were able to figure out this word, entheogen, generating the divine within, bringing forth the God from within. How do you think it came to have that powerful of a word created that exists thousands of years later to describe what it does? That's what I think. That how do they get involved? That's how they get involved. Taking agency, considering natural psychedelics. And if they're going to consider these entheogens, these natural psychedelics, in what methodology or what delivery system that they would use, And I would suggest, microdosing psychedelic mushrooms to begin. It's a subperceptual amount. It's not going to generate a psychedelic experience to where you're out of control. You are completely functional. However, what it does do is it brings the benefits of the mushroom inside of your body working already physiologically. The mental benefits, the physical benefits, the spiritual benefits, mental benefits, improved concentration, more direct um, cognition, higher creativity, increased productivity, balanced mood, um, more positive mindset. If you're working on personal development in any way, those are the mental benefits. Physical benefits, improved sleep. How many people do you know have a problem with sleep? Right? And as we get older, we start to wake up at like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and then fall asleep another few hours. And all of a sudden they're up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. So improved sleep, higher energy, increased sensory perception, intuition, instinct. There's an element that we teach at the Church of Psychedelics, which is um, psychic development. Because when you start to have these deja vu moments and you're flying in your dreams, or you have lucid dreams and you've never had that before or to any significant degree predictably, and you start to have them, how do you work with those? Right? Decreased pain levels, that's a big one. Decreased pain levels. Yeah, cannabis and psychedelic mushrooms for decreased pain levels with there's no addiction. You Psychedelic mushrooms, psilocybin is non-addictive. You can never overdose on it. You can take too much to have an experience, a mental psychedelic experience. You can take too much, you're not going to die. You are not going to. It cannot. It's non-addictive. You can't overdose. It's completely natural. The reason that they don't most companies don't drug test for it because it is so biologically available to your body that all of the molecules in the body that it takes to create that get used, put in used for your body, and then excreted throughout your body through the normal systems so quickly because it's water based. They can't, and it's very expensive to test for it. I'm not saying everybody go do this recreationally, although that's fine if you want to. That's what it's for. It's an ally. That's why people use cannabis. You know, take a couple gummies and go to the concert at Red Rocks. That's what it's for. It's meant for us to dance and sing and life. But the politicians are like, you can't have fun on it. Don't you dare have fun on it. That's illegal. That's recreational. What do you think our doctors right now don't do today? When's the last time you went to the doctor and the doctor said, "Hey, Jonathan, when's the last time you ran as fast as you could run? When's the last time you sang as loud as you could sing? When is the last time you got for a community and danced? When's the last time you sat around and told jokes till your belly hurt so bad you couldn't even stop laughing? You couldn't stop laughing anymore. Like, when's the last time you did that? No doctor ever asks that and never asks you the things that make you human.
So
That's what
true.
they don't. So that's what the benefits are, from the spiritual benefits, an increased sense of awe and wonder about the world, a sense of unity. Jonathan is friends with Doug just because he's human, and Doug is friends with Jonathan just because Jonathan's human. I have Jonathan's best interests at heart because I understand the human endeavor, and vice versa. We have a deeper sense of emotional connection to each other, a greater emotional awareness of the world and others in it, an increased open mindedness of what's possible. So mental benefits, physical benefits, spiritual benefits. These are the things that these natural plant medicines deliver to the world. And I think a good doorway to walk into is microdosing psychedelics. And so, this I'm the founder of the Church of Psychedelics. So if you just go to the churchofpsychedelics.com, and somewhere in there you'll be able to find what does it mean to work with sacrament. We use the word sacrament because that's what it is. It's a spiritual technology. It will help us in our healing aspect. It will help us with our human aspect. And so, you want to get to about 90 days of an interval type of protocol. We use what's called the Red Hail protocol. 3 days on, 2 days off. It has a stack with some other molecules in there to help out with like lion's mane and turkey tail and L-theanine and magnesium glycinate and some other things that help that help as agonists to the serotonin effect in your body. Um, but yeah, there's on days, there's off days. It's a very simple system. You get to 90 days, then take 2 weeks to 4 weeks off and start again. That's, I think, is probably one of the best ways. And then once you get comfortable, in mentally, working with psychedelics and get yourself ready, then you can work into a little bit larger dose. It doesn't have to be a crazy dose. You're not going to be blasting off, but it could be kind of that Red Rocks concert level of, okay, I'm going to go down this path. I'm going to open up my doors of perception a little bit wider now, and I'm going to, take, 1 or 2 grams. And then you start to have then you that's when a lot of the people, a lot of the activists and protagonists that are like, this is why you know what they say? Nobody, I've heard this before. What is it? Absolutely nobody should be in a position of power over other people until they've taken 5 grams of mushrooms in a dark room. Because until you can come and hardwire your system into empathy and compassion and sympathy and what's best for the world and the humans in it and the other sentient beings that are in it, and understand that you're part of the circle, you're not some sort of apex into, aggrandized personality at the top to rule over others. Until you are understanding of your role and your responsibilities, not to yourself and your donors, but to like the people, yeah, then you should not be in that position of power at all. But those are the people telling you that you shouldn't be on it. You should not have natural psychedelics. Those are the same people. So that's why
I
we have to move away from those systems of power and authority and control and take agency and make your own ideas around power, authority, and control.
I agree 100%, especially when it comes to your health. If you don't have your health, you don't have much of anything. And that's mental, I mean, we talk about the holistic, it's mind, body, soul. It's everything.
Yeah,
And you need to be in control of it.
yeah.
Doug Red Hail Pineda, it has been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, you got me on a day to where I'm all fired up all of a sudden. So I really appreciate it, Jonathan. Speaking, I know that I occupied the majority of the conversation. So thank you for allowing me, that space. I really appreciate it. It's very valuable to me to know. And it doesn't get missed that I did get a chance to ask you some other questions as well. But that's what the nature of these podcasts are. And Jonathan, I want to thank you for what you do and how you bring this idea of taking agency over our own health. That's what attracted me to for you and I connecting about meeting together and doing this today, because the voices like yourself is so important and so needed, especially right now in the era of humanity that we are in. From me to you, thank you so much for doing your work and for your audience that you're for receiving this information.
I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate that. I really do. I mean, again, I said from the beginning, it's keeping an open mind and understanding there is a lot more out there than what you've been told. There's a lot more out there. So keep an open mind and go check out Doug and his website because, again, there's a lot of great people out there trying to help you. So we'll post everything in the blog as we normally do. And again, Doug, it was an absolute pleasure, and we'll definitely do this again.
Pleasure is mine, Jonathan. I look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Much
And to
love.
all of you, thank you all for listening. And as we continue our health and wellness journeys, find the attitude, keep the attitude, go out living. Bye, everybody.